People ask me how I got to London, and I just say I hated New York.
I was only there for like 6 months, and I was like, "Yeah, we're good. We're good."
Yeah, gosh, you're smarter. It took me 2 years. Actually,
Well, it was 9/11, so it was a very different world even back then.
Yeah, well, that's when I was there too, but still unpleasant. But I'm from Boston, so Toronto seems.
Well, Beantown's one of my favorite cities, and I'm there actually often with work.
Are you really?
Am I going to need to delete this first part of your conversation?
That's fine. You can delete.
As long as there's nothing too secret here.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate it, and I'm sorry I keep delaying it a little bit because it takes me a little while to get the all the tech connected, and I'm also trying to be clever to have like a 5-minute intro, like a countdown, and then by the time I sort that out on my laptop, and then I come back and do this on my phone, so I'm still a little bit useless on that front, but hey, there's always hope. Shall we get started?
Sure.
Good stuff. Right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you very much for joining us. This is Startup Talent Q&A. It's our 146th session. We've been doing these for almost 4 years now, and we've had over 270,000 people that have come through these rooms, and we've answered about 2,000 questions now. None of that would have happened without people like Emily, Rosie, and Carl, their fellow panelists. So please show them your love, follow them on LinkedIn, and ask for their help. Obviously, they do this for free so that they don't have to keep doing other stuff for free. So please do bear that in mind. Now, the way this works, it's quite simple. You see, unfortunately, over 90% of startups fail. And the top 3 reasons for that are 1, market fit, 2, running out of money, and 3, not having the right people. So you guessed it right. When you really drill down, it all comes down to having the right people to not only survive, but to actually thrive. And hopefully we'll be able to help you do that today. Our sessions are quite simple and straightforward, I like to think. The way it works is, for those of you that are here with us on Microsoft Teams, you type your question in the chat, we then give you a mic, and you can ask our panel. Those questions today can be on anything to do with your startup talent, whether it's how and where to find, keep, hire, and empower the right people for your business. Perhaps you might want to know how to interview some people, how to get a job spec done, how to put an advert out there. Where do you find certain roles? How much you pay them? Maybe you want to talk about certain disputes that you have and all that jazz. There are no wrong questions and there's no need to be shy. It's a learning curve for us all. However, I can see quite a few of you on our live streams, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. You may definitely have your reasons for doing that, but unfortunately, we are unable to monitor your questions there. So if you do want to ask our brilliant panel today anything to do with your startup talent, you would need to join us here on Microsoft Teams. There's a couple of ways you can do that. Number one, it's to click on a link that I've posted on all of those live streams, which will take you to Microsoft Teams, a quick registration, and Bob's your uncle. But if for any reason that's not working, you can always go to our website, startup2scaleup.club, look for today's session, which is Startup Talent Q&A 146. And from there, you'll be able to join us. Once that quick registration is done, you get an email, check your spam or junk, get an email and click on that link to join us live. Now, the way we're going to do this today is we'll go through some quick introductions, then our brilliant panel will perhaps give us their biggest do's and don'ts when it comes to early stage talent, and then we'll answer your questions. Now, if your questions, by the way, are on anything else but talent, so on other themes, please save them for the other conversations we host. So we're currently doing 6 regular events: Monday's talent, Tuesday's product and tech, Wednesday's growth, Thursday's fundraising, and then second Friday of the month, it's legal, UK startup law, that is. And third Friday of the month, it's UK startup finances. They're all from 12 to 1 p.m. UK time. And you can RSVP to any of them via our site, StartUp2scaleup.club. And actually, a good thing to do is to join our WhatsApp group. When you go to our site, at the top and bottom of the site, there's a WhatsApp icon you can click on. And there, if you join that, you'll then be able to get alerts to all future events we run. And last announcement, before we go on to the introductions, is that our Startup of the Month competition is now closed. We have, I believe there's 4 that will go live at some point today on our LinkedIn page. We'll put the recording they submitted, and the one that gets the most likes will then be featured throughout the entirety of March in our Q&As. We've got 19 events there, and the winner will be featured there. We have done this on purpose, and we've gone and picked female founders, especially with being March, but I think nevertheless they do deserve more visibility than others, because I don't want to sound too morbid and vulgar, but in the UK and most Western countries, which are way more ahead than others, you are pretty much more likely to get run over by a bus if you're a female founder than gets investment. So I think we should all do our bit to help them gain the exposure they need and deserve. Now, with that morbid fact in mind, let's do some quick introductions. My name's Anton Call. I'm an Albanian in London working with startups. Normally, right after they get investment, I embed within their teams and help them hire and keep the right people. I also do some growth advisory work for a few other startups and some accelerators. And lately, I've been helping some angels and family offices with their due diligence and assessments. I guess we can start with Emily, who joined first, I think, and then Rosie, and then Carl, if that's all right. Emily?
Hi there. Happy to be here. My name is Emily Coolin. I'm a Canadian who lives in the UK. And after 20-something years in building companies on this HR front, I have focused my time in the last while really being a founder coach, a scale-up coach, working on people strategy for investment rounds, as well as really doing one-on-one leadership coaching and team optimization.
Thank you, Emily. Rosie?
Thanks, Anton. Hi, everyone. I'm Rosie Hewitt. I am founder and CEO of Rosie's People, HR and business operations consultancy. My background is in HR and business operations for over 20 years, with a primary focus in the fintech startup investor-led businesses for the last decade. I'm happy to be here and share knowledge.
Thank you, Rosie. Yes, Carl.
Hi, I'm Carl. I'm a fractional chief people officer now for a small company called Analyst Pro, previously for about 7 years for a synthetic data company called Hazy. My background was Wall Street and private equity for a while before getting back to people, which is the only thing I'm interested in, really. And for the last 16 years, I've had an academy where we help people who are high performers at work and low performers in taking care of themselves and trying to equalize those, and to do that for them as individuals and to do that in the workplace as well.
That's brilliant. Well, you've heard them, people. We've got 3 amazing panelists with us today. They've all been there and done it. Now willing to take any questions you may have for us today on your talent journey. Again, for those of you that are tuning in via live streams, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, we're thankful that you've done so, but please be aware that unfortunately we're unable to monitor your questions there. There's no point in trying to send me messages. I can see things flashing, but unfortunately, because I'm focused on this session, I can't really go and check your questions there. So what you'd need to do is join us interactively here on Microsoft Teams. It's live audio, so and audio only, which means there is no video and no camera, so you can join us from anywhere, whether you are changing your baby's nappies in Glasgow, or cooking lunch in Liverpool, or walking your dog in Surrey. It can be anywhere. All you need is the internet and any device, and perhaps you might need headphones, but that's about it, really. So it's a quick registration. You should have that link on all of those live streams, but if for any reason that's not working, join our site. Go onto our site, startup-to-scaleup.club. Look for Startup Talent Q&A 146, and there you need to click join, quick registration on Microsoft Teams. You'll then get an email, so check your spam or junk, and there you'll then be able to get that link. It brings you here live. Once you're here live with us on Microsoft Teams, all you have to do is just put your question in the chat room. We'll then give you the mic, and your question today can be on anything to do with your team. There are no wrong questions, really, and there's no need to be shy. It's a learning curve for us all. But in the meantime, I guess we can go on to some do's and don'ts. So perhaps we can start with Carl, then Rosie, then Emily, please. What are your biggest do's and don'ts when it comes to early stage startup talent?
I think the biggest don't is to not make mistakes that are avoidable. And I mean, it's important to make mistakes. It's definitional to do it, but you want to make your own that are unique and really provide value. So I actually think one of the first things is to make sure you're really well advised on the different just fundamental components of a business, regardless of what it is, on product, on tech, on people, and on runway. And I think rather than rush to hire people, I would rush to hire quality advisors. So yeah, that'd be my number one tip.
Thank you very much, Carl. Yes, Rose.
Thank you. My tip is usually my go-to tip, which is be certain about what you're looking for. Make sure you've done a skills gap analysis. You know, what are you actually looking to fill within your organization? What are the skills that are missing? What are the skills that need to be complemented? And my don'ts, just don't lie to your candidates. Be very honest about what you can offer, what your expectations are. Treat people like adults and respect.
Thanks, Rosie. Yes, Emily.
I would say that similar to others, and I love the tips that Rosie and Carl have given. My big one is be patient. I know there's a lot of pressure to build quickly, and there's a lot of pressure to move quickly, but the mistakes happen when we don't take that time to be patient enough to realize not only what we need, but what we don't need. So it is a marathon, not a sprint. I know that's pretty cliche, but that's the truth. So I would say that every startup founder, especially on the people side, need to be a little bit patient.
Thank you very much, all three of you, for those brilliant points there. Really valuable. And unfortunately, things that founders in general tend to go through quite often, again and again, actually, more often than not. So I'm glad you've pointed them out. I think now it's time to get some questions in. Now, it would be nicer if we had people from the start to ask questions live here on Microsoft Teams. Nevertheless, we can, for now, go through some questions that were sent in. By the way, for those of you that are tuning in via the other platforms like LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, please be aware that unfortunately, we're unable to monitor your questions live there. So you'll need to join us live here on Microsoft Teams. It's audio only. There's a link to that stream on all of that conversation on all of your platforms, wherever you're tuning in from. But if for any reason that's not working, all you have to do is just go to our site, startup-to-scaleup.club, find today's session, which is Startup Talent Q&A 146, and ask us anything you want to in terms of finding, hiring, keeping, and empowering the right people for your business. Once you click join there, it's a quick registration. Then you get a link, which brings you straight into our conversation here on Microsoft Teams. You'll type in your question in the chat, and then we'll give you the mic. Nevertheless, without further ado, I think we can go to some questions that were sent in. I'll put that in the chat room, but I'll read it out loud for the live streams, and perhaps if my panelists want to go through it as well. But it's okay. So this is from somebody in Bristol. She says, we're a bootstrap pre-seed SaaS startup in Bristol that develops productivity tools for small businesses. We're hiring a full-time marketing manager, and we want to develop a benefits package that attracts top talent, but also fits within our constrained resources. How can we balance competitive salary expectations with non-monetary benefits like work flexibility or professional development opportunities, and so on? So maybe we can start this time with Emily, then Rosie, and then Carl, please.
Thanks, Anton. So I would also, I think I would challenge, based on your stage, do you need to compete in terms of benefits? Because if the challenge of the work is there and this person is a fit for a startup environment, you may not need to compete on the benefit side. You may need to just be really much more flexible and make sure you're meeting their needs on the other aspects. It is really tricky to try and compete against bigger companies. So I'm a big fan of really find out what these people need, ask them the hard questions, and then figure out where the middle ground or what that compromise could be for you to meet those needs. Maybe it's not all at once. Maybe you can move on a step process or whichever else. So for example, if you've got somebody who re-entering the workforce or something like that, and that flexibility is going to be key, great. That could be instead of some of the flashier benefits that they may not need or they may not need right now. So that's probably a bit of a cop-out answer, but really ask the questions. Now, the only challenge I've got with that is you have to proceed as you mean to continue. So don't offer something to somebody that you can't offer to somebody else. So be quite flexible if you can, but then also make sure that you're setting the tone for what you're actually is sustainable for the growth of your company.
Thank you, Emily. That's interesting. Rosie?
I would I agree with Emily's sentiment at the stage that you're at. Having a competitive benefits package may not actually be feasible. You may not be able to afford it because benefits are actually quite expensive. Whilst they are really good to have, I think that there are other benefits that could be offered. There could be in-house training, teaching people cross-skilling, I suppose, teaching people other people's skills, which could add as a benefit. There are other things that you can look at that doesn't require breaking the bank, so to speak. But most people who join startups, they're not there primarily for the benefits. They're there because they want to be part of the growth journey and they want to add value and have meaningful impact. So that as well could be leveraged, more efficiently to be a benefit in terms of the L&D element that could provide to the individuals that have decided to drink your Kool-Aid, so to speak. I think it's important to look outside of what is on offer and then comparing yourself to established businesses who can offer very enhanced benefits, because you wouldn't be able to keep up. It doesn't hurt to get some benefit consultation. A lot of them are actually free. You could literally speak to benefit brokers. They won't charge you a penny to tell you what your options are, and they give you an idea of costs. And then you can maybe plan for that in the long term, maybe stagger that as you get the budget for that. You can then plan accordingly which ones you would be able to do. And of course, you can always give people whatever little cash you have available to say, hey, I can't give you a benefit, but I have this £5. If you want to use it to buy yourself a sandwich every week, it's on me. But that's really all I can offer at this point.
Thank you very much, Rosie. Yes, Carl.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what both Rosie and Emily said. So just taking it slightly to a further extreme, I think for a bootstrap company with having an extensive benefits package is actually a very negative signal, because again, I just think it's signaling that you're not managing cash well, and as an overall priority. I do think that small amounts. Rosie mentioned the £5 for lunch. Those matter and those add up. I would not be dismissive at all of small amounts. And I think that although we all think of, and it is true for all startups, that like time is super precious, etc. I mean, I think in this case, time is your ally, and it doesn't cost it doesn't really cost anything to give someone a day off a year for volunteering or something like that. So I think there are things you can play around with that either are low monetary value or have time value that again, people will value. But it goes back to Emily's point. You have to start with understanding what people, where people are at, basically.
Well, thank you very much, all three of you. I'll put another question in the chat, but actually, before we go to that, I think it's important, if you don't mind, that we spend a bit more time on this point here, because I often get approached by startups. I'm looking for this person, I'm looking for that person. I've interviewed people, I've spoken to people, but I haven't got the money. And even if and when they do have some money, I'm not able to pay them the salary that they can get elsewhere. And then on the other hand, people that I've known, throughout my professional life, whenever they reach out to me and say, "Oh, look, Tony, I've been approached by this startup, and since you work with startups, I'd love to pick your brains on this, because to be honest with you, the salary isn't that great, and I need some stability in my life. What do you reckon I should do?" And the point I'm trying to make here is that it's extremely hard for startups to compete with most other businesses out there that have been around. What do you do at this stage? Now, I know it does make sense to go to the people that do buy in, but unfortunately, most people don't buy into that culture anyway. So how do you get people to buy in when, established LTD out there, or perhaps big tech out there, can pay them 10 times more? What do you do? And especially, for companies that aren't in the big metropolises where there's always almost always room for everybody. What do you do if you're somewhere in Bristol and you've got a startup competing with people that perhaps are even paying some outrageous figures for people to work from home? What would you do at that point? I guess we can start with maybe Rosie, then Carl, then Emily on this, if that's all right.
I think it's important for companies and individuals in companies to be aware of this situation. It may sound a little harsh, but it's good to want to do things. It's a good place to be mentally, that you want to do things the right way. You want to have these things in place. You want to be competitive, etc. But I think that brutal honesty to yourself, especially at the early stages where every penny counts, every penny makes the difference between whether you're going to be still working or even operating the next day. And how you spend that is very important, because, of course, if you are a company that is looking for funding in the future, as our colleague here has mentioned earlier on, you will be scrutinized, as Carl mentioned, you will be scrutinized by investors, and how you spend money. And if they feel like you're wasting it, then your chances of actually securing funding in the future could be affected by the decisions you made whilst trying to do the nice things. So I don't think there's an easy fix for this. Every individual, or rather every company, will have to assess their situation and then make a decision based on their individual situation. There isn't a correct answer for everybody, unfortunately, because what works for one company may not work for the other. So it requires a lot of, self-analysis, a lot of self-discipline, a lot of difficult decision making, which may make you an unpopular employer to begin with, but in the long term could prove invaluable to your longevity and ability to succeed in this particular sector, which is very, very competitive. So I don't have a perfect answer to offer, unfortunately. I think this is very much based per company and their individual situations, and then making the call based on their finances and what they can do. I think there are also very creative ways to build a team without needing to spend a lot of money. And as Carl and Emily have mentioned, there are other things that can be done. But I think when you're still at the early stages, how you manage your money really matters, especially if you're thinking you might want to, raise more money in the future.
I hear you. Thank you very much for that, Rosie. Carl?
It sounds a bit funny to say, but I want people to get paid fair amounts, and I think it's obviously a critical thing. So I mentioned that because, like, to me, the object of the exercise is not to have the lowest salary role of any comparable company out there. I think that is, and there are companies that think of it that way. I just personally, that's pretty distasteful to me. On the other hand, there's no point competing with big tech on salaries like that. It just doesn't, it's just a waste of time. And also, notwithstanding what I said before about salaries, for someone that you're going to really need and want to try and build around and really grow, I just don't believe in competing on comp to get them. I think if it's, again, you're in a range that's objectively fair, etc. My experience, you win people based on whether you've got a mission and a workplace and an opportunity for them that's compelling or not. That won't overcome a huge pay gap, but at the margin, at least in my limited experience, it does make a very big difference. And I think those are the people that you want, right? That are bought in. And obviously there's all the things that can go with it also in terms of options and so on and so forth. But I think it's a more fundamental thing that you either have a really attractive, proposition for people, and that's enough to sway them at the margin, or not. And I think trying to compete beyond that is, as I say, just a waste of time.
Thank you, Carl. Last but not least, Emily?
I would echo everything that has been said. I think I would, again, emphasize what Carl said. The total opportunity is probably where the attractiveness needs to be, not just about compensation and not even just the individual parts of compensation. I also think that a lot of startups try to work on a champagne budget when they are definitely a lot more like Prosecco. So you may not be able to get the talent that you want, but you can still get great talent if you look at the core skills. So if there's a marketing manager or marketing a resource who has been used to being at the big agencies or something, yeah, you may not be able to afford them, and that's okay. Find somebody who worked under them, or find somebody with a really great core skills that you can attract in with the growth opportunities, not necessarily a big title and compensation. And I think that there's a creativity that needs to be there. So listening to different advisors or talking to peers to find out what other people are doing, ideally in your space. Spend the money where you actually have to spend the money, but don't spend it, to try and compete where maybe you shouldn't be competing yet.
I hear you. So in a way, you're not at the stage that you can afford, so stop trying to. What happens though when you need the job done, but you haven't got the money to hire people, and people aren't buying into your equity or potential and so on? Do you just try and carry on doing it yourself and then go towards pretty much guaranteed failure almost? Or do you just wait until you have saved and bootstrapped enough money or built enough traction to get investment to find people? What do you do at that stage? I guess we can pick up from Carl, then Emily, and Rosie.
I mean, I think it depends in that example, really what you're talking about. If it's a specific task, etc. I mean, there are lots of sites from Fiverr to others where you can find like tremendous talent available around the world to do it. So I think it really depends what it is. If it's kind of a task like that can be easily defined and kind of put out to tender, it really is amazing how much talent there is globally that is accessible. I think if it's something that is, I don't know, like more like product driven or something like that doesn't lend itself to that, and you don't have any other choice, then it's like it's a startup. You got to do it yourself. There's really no two ways around it, unless you can hack another way, or get someone to get a mentor, or get something like that, where you can kind of like synthetically fuse that together with you doing whatever is needed to do it. So
fair enough. Thank you very much for that. I think it's next. I can't remember if I said Emily or Rosie, but either of you ladies, whichever wants to go first, it's fine.
I don't mind going next. I mean, I agree with what Carl said. I think you will have times when you absolutely need to get something done, but there's no money, and you're basically feeling stuck. What I would say in such instances, if you do need to have that piece of work done, if it's absolutely critical to moving your project or your build forward, then try to negotiate with the skill provider, maybe to have an ability to pay them flexibly if they're open to it. So just to buy yourself some time to make the money that will be needed to pay for that skill that you absolutely need, but having the work delivered immediately. Now, this is not something that I would always recommend, because of course, when you try to get paid as well from companies that don't seem to have money, you get a bit of the heebie-jeebies yourself, because you also need the confidence to do the work, and not be scared that you're not going to be paid. And of course, in the event that the equity piece, obviously, as you've mentioned, is not on offer and it's not something that people are interested in, I would always kind of weigh it up on how critical is this piece of work that we need done. Is it going to make or break the proposition? If you need a specific type of coding done and you don't have the skills yourself, and you need somebody who has those skills to do it, and that person is saying, no, I want to get paid, then you would probably need to arrange some sort of payment plan with them if you can't afford to pay them immediately. And as you know, Kyle's mentioned, there are other places where you could look at, like Fiverr and the works for them, like Upworks, etc. So you can do that, and there are companies out there that could potentially agree to do a partnership with you to do the build, to get a stake in your company. But again, this would be a business to business as opposed to an individual. It's just a case of what works for you. The focus should always be on how critical is that skill, and if not having that skill is going to mean that your idea and the whole proposition dies, then it's worth making some sacrifices to make sure that that piece of work is done however you can do that. And of course, I always say treat people like adults. If you talk to the person and you can come up with an agreement that works, that may not be regular standard agreements that you would have done with anybody else, but it works for both of you and you're both willing to accept it, then that might be the solution. So I think things like this is, you know, creativity becomes key because you're trying to do the most with nothing. So yeah, it's possible, but be open-minded to what approaches to adopt is what I would suggest.
Thank you, Rosie. Yes, Emily.
I would bring it back to that creativity piece that Rosie and Carl both mentioned. It depends on the skill sets needed, and you know, are you willing to? Is there somebody willing to work for sweat equity, or can you partner with a university? Can you, or a college or something? What is the skill set needed? Is it a senior level, strategic level, or is it sort of a doer level? Because I think that once you have a really good look at that. One of the things I caution a lot of founders about is, yes, it may feel easier to do things on your own because of cost, but if you are actually not skilled at it, or it's going to take you twice, 3 times, 4 times as long to do it, there is value in you spending a bit of money on Fiverr, Upwork, whatever it may be, to get somebody to do that work. Because as a founder, CEO, however you want to title yourself, your time is money as well. And if you should be spending your time doing more the strategic or even the fundraising piece of it, you shouldn't be doing, you know, the basic coding. Doesn't mean you can't. There's a lot of amazing technical founders out there, but I'm just saying that, like, really value your time for money, and then figure out where you can fill those gaps. Complement yourself and complement the rest of your team with some extra help. I'm a big fan of, like, the freelance market, you know, fractional, all of those things can do amazing work. And maybe you have to pay them, but it may not be a lot, or there's some sort of payment plan. I also really like the idea of partnerships with coding classes at universities or whatever it may be.
This panel's on fire today, and it really, this really boils down to, and it drills down to the heart of startup culture. Basically, if I got it right, it's, mind you, this is a belief and a thing I've observed for years in startup land. You pretty much need one or a mixture of 3 things: the money to build the startup, the ability to influence other people, or the ability to build things up to a point where you can get either other people or money to help you go further. And in a way, it almost kind of says that, you know, startup building is a bit elitist in itself, i.e., if you're broke, don't go for a startup. That's one. And that's also why the second reason, rather than just money itself, it's this people side, this stuff that we're talking about is the reason why over 90% of startups actually do end up failing, because they haven't been started in the right manner or following the right course by startups. Often I meet founders that tell me about their startup, and unfortunately I have to tell them, look, mate, you actually need a job. You don't need to start a startup at this point. And obviously the first reason, it's product, it's a market fit, because I think it's either 85 or 87% of people start building their startup without doing any research. There's 150 million startups today in the world, and research says that by this time next year, well, 60% of them would have disappeared. So bear that in mind. Now, we've got 22 minutes to go. Hopefully, some of you that have tuned in via LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram haven't been put off, but are still keen on taking your startup to the next stage. And maybe you might have some questions in terms of people, whether it is finding, hiring, keeping, or empowering the right people. Any such questions, you'll need to be here with us on Microsoft Teams, because unfortunately, we can't monitor your questions there on those live streams. So you can either click on the links that we have there, or perhaps you can go to our site, startup-to-scaleup.club, and then find today's session, which is Startup Talent Q&A 146. Click join, quick registration. You then get a link via email, so check your spam or junk, and then you can join us live and interactively here on Microsoft Teams. But if your questions are not on talent today, then save them for the other rooms, for the other conversations. We run Monday's talent, as you can see today, and then Tuesdays it's product and tech, Wednesdays it's growth, Thursdays it's fundraising, second Friday of the month it's UK startup law, and third Friday of the month it's UK startup finances. They're all from 12 to 1 p.m. UK time, and you can RSVP to any of them via our website, startup-to-scaleup.club. And actually, when you're there, you might want to join our WhatsApp group. There's a WhatsApp icon at the top and bottom of our site there. And I guess, whilst it would be nicer and more interactive and actually be more fun if you were here live on Microsoft Teams, if the panelists don't mind, we can go to some other questions that were sent in. I'll read this out loud for those of you on the live streams. So, I'm the co-founder of a pre-seed education technology startup in Nottingham, where we develop learning management systems for schools. We're onboarding our first full-time employee, a customer success manager. What are the key elements we should include in our onboarding process to ensure they understand both the product and our company culture, especially in a remote-first environment? I hope my team had a chance to look at it. Maybe we can start with Emily, Rosie, and then Carl, please.
Sure. So I think one of the key elements of customer success is understanding two things. One, the product, and two, the audience or the customer. So I mean, the onboarding, I've seen really great success with who is that target audience, and can this person, as part of their onboarding, have really good discussions, interviews, however you want to phrase it, with either target customers or existing customers. So really, really digging into what are those needs, because then they can meet those needs when they're sort of really onboarded. They have to understand what the limitations are the stretch and the opportunities are with the product. So, you know, those two sides of it are the key things for me in an onboarding. Obviously, understanding the roles and responsibilities of everybody else on the team is important too, so that you know who to lean on. But it is all easily done in a remote first environment, as long as you have really targeted conversations.
Here. Thank you very much for that, Emily. Yes, Rosie. What was it, Carl? I can't remember. Rosie, do you want to go ahead?
I was just going to say I'm not sure either, but yeah, I'm fine either way. I mean, I think everything Emily's just said is correct. I think it's quite important if you're talking about your customer experience. The most important thing I think is to make sure that whomever is dealing with your customers is supremely aware and knowledgeable of your product ins and outs. I think this is where it becomes even critical that the product team have regular sessions with the customer operations team to educate them on the various elements of the product, just so that they can deal with customer queries immediately and effectively. I think knowledge is very important, and of course, utilizing technology as well to streamline and be consistent is also useful. There are various platforms out there that support this, but of course, it depends on your budget and what you're actually trying to achieve. I'm not an expert on customer care and customer service operations. I have helped to build them. I have seen best practices. But the one thing that I would definitely recommend more than anything is to ensure that the product builders are speaking to the people that are talking to customers about the products and educating them on the details and the nuances of the products so that they can effectively sell it in a positive way.
Thank you very much, Rosie. Yes, Scott.
Yeah, I think those are. I mean, I think those are all great suggestions. I think if you're just going to add on some alternative, not alternative, but additional things to that, which would be, in my opinion, like lower in priority than everything you just heard before. One would be to make a list of anyone and anything in the onboarding that you don't think is critical to that person's onboarding, and then actually have the person focus on that list of things that aren't critical. What happens a lot, I think, with when people onboard, et cetera, is they make a list of what's essential, and they do tend to ignore other parts of the company, et cetera. And I think when anyone joins, you just have a unique opportunity to really connect with them at that time before there's any weird dynamics or anything on that. And so I think that's a huge missed opportunity in general for onboarding, is that opportunity to connect with people that are not absolutely essential to your onboarding, because those that are, you're going to do. I think the second thing, which relates to that, if a company is kind of at that stage, I think we did it 3 times at Hazy. There's an exercise, and you can definitely do this remotely, though it is better in person, which is to draw out from the beginning, truly from the beginning of the company, to get a huge mural board or whatever, and just draw out together collectively the history of the company. The reason for that is, well, the number of reasons, but one reason in particular is, I think it's just a normal sort of human phenomenon that when a person joins a company, they think of that as kind of being day one of the company. I mean, they don't literally think that, but de facto, that's there. And at such a critical stage is what we're talking about here, which is pre-seed and a first employee. I think that opportunity, especially within a remote context, for doing this kind of group exercise of walking through and kind of levelizing and rebasing the context and development of the company to this stage is an extremely good investment, high ROI event. So those would just be 2 other things.
Well, that is brilliant stuff from all 3 of you, and I really appreciate that. I think 14 minutes ago, I think we've got time for one last question, perhaps, that was sent in. And for those of you that are tuning in via our live streams, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn, please remember that we are unable to monitor your questions there live, so you'll need to join us here on Microsoft Teams to do that. You've got links on all of those streams, but if for any reason you can't get to them through you can't get here through them, then just go to our site, StartUp to ScaleUp.club. Look for today's session, Startup Talent Q&A 146. Click join, quick registration, and then you'll get an email with the link in your email. We're only going to be here for the next 13 minutes, so if you do want to ask us questions, you'll need to rush. Nevertheless, we'll go to another question. I'm the co-founder, so I'm assuming one of 4 co-founders of a seed stage software startup in Manchester, where we develop security software for small businesses. We're hiring overseas contractors for a critical development role. What background checks should we perform to ensure that the contractors have the necessary qualifications and expertise, particularly when working remotely and across borders? That's an interesting one. Let's start with Carl, then Rosie, then Emily, please.
Yeah, that is an interesting question. I guess 2 things. The first is nothing to do actually with the question itself, but rather with the 4 co-founders. I think unless you're very, very careful, that is a recipe for disaster. Just having that number of co-founders. I mean, it's fine if that actually transpired, but I think like more than anything else, you need to move quite quickly to thin that sort of list out or put people in their boxes, that's going to be relevant for them. Having 4 co-founders floating around can really just cause a lot of difficulty in the business. So that'd be the first thing. I think for security type of things, this is kind of comparable to what we had a number of years ago. And I think the best suggestion would actually be to go to your customers to see what the requirements they're going to have for you as a provider to them are. So we did that like with Experian, for instance, for some of our enterprise software customers, and we looked at all the requirements that they had of us, and then we went and mirrored those in terms of the ones we, when we look to hire people. So that would be just a suggestion on that.
Thank you very much, Carl. Rosie, any thoughts on this?
I don't really have much more to add. I think I would echo Carl's sentiments regarding the number of co-founders. The one thing I would always say in such a situation, it becomes very important that you do have things drafted legally that sets out your positions so that there's less disputes in the future. But I don't have much more to add to what Carl has said so far, unfortunately, no.
Thank you very much. Emily, any thoughts on checks for these people?
Yeah, I mean, I echo the 4 co-founders. One thing, I don't want to belabor on that point, but one thing is to really be clear on who's doing what out of your co-founders, and including making sure that you've got a very clear list of sort of roles and responsibilities, including hiring. So if you have one co-founder and responsible for hiring these overseas contractors, then they need to take on the accountability of all the parts of that, if that makes sense. I mean, obviously with input. But when it comes to specifically security software, background checks are not going to be valid in different countries, not for all customers. So you have to be really, really mindful. My biggest recommendation when it comes to background checks and when you're working with a international sort of group or across borders is to partner with an organization, GP Strategies, sorry, what is it called? So Deal. I think there's a whole bunch of them now who actually who will do that piece for you. So they'll do the background checks. They will make sure that the background checks are actually transferable. So I'll give you an example of one startup who is trying to sell into the US, and they're somewhat in security software, a little bit of fintech security. The background checks in the UK are valid for the US, but they're not valid for other places. So be really, really careful. So again, partner with one of these amazing third-party companies. They cost money, but I think it's really worthwhile for just sort of peace of mind and covering your liability. Don't make assumptions that what one company or country will allow for background checks, the others will, especially depending on how you want to expand. So my belief is when it comes to background checks, go in this industry, go harder, go with bigger ones, but make sure you go with somebody who actually is in the know, like a partner.
Here, and I echo that. And definitely go for a company that does this internationally, somebody who's reputable. Maybe talk to a few if price is an issue. Speak to a few and get whatever you think it's the best deal for you. In terms of hiring them, it depends. If you're simply hiring them as a business and you just pay them a bill, then you don't need to do as much work in terms of that contract inside. Emily mentioned companies like Deal and so on. They're quite good, these companies, if you actually need to hire somebody overseas, either as a contractor or as an employee, and they do it all for you. But if you simply need the background checks, then maybe you might want to actually do the research. For example, I'm not sure how, and that's why I keep saying, just join us live here interactively so we can ask follow-ups. because otherwise we can't give you the best possible answers to whatever question you have. But nevertheless, if these people, if you've gone maybe to a company that is offering you these contractors out there, then you need to deal with that company and make sure that they do the right checks. And if you need to go beyond it, then you need to speak to this company, because they are the ones that need to perhaps even get them to actually pay for these background checks that you do with these companies. So that's why, again, I'd strongly recommend you join us live, perhaps next Monday or whenever, if you need any more detail on this question. We are now 6 minutes to go. I'm not sure we've got time for another question, but perhaps our brilliant panelists want to take their time in giving us their parting words for today, if that's all right. So we'll start with the ladies of the house. We'll start with Emily, then Rosie, then Carl, please.
Thank you, Anton. So I think the more you can ask questions, the more you can get outside of your own way and sort of challenge your own ego, the better you're going to succeed. Too many founders who sort of say, oh, I can figure it out, a Google search is enough, or I know, when they may not be in that space. And to be fair, most founders are not in kind of the people space. So ask around, find some valuable people to put into that sort of circle of advice. Make sure that you're not abusing that advice and that you're not, utilizing them as unpaid talent. But ask, find out what peers are doing. Be questioning everything, and you'll be better for that.
Yes, Rosie.
Thanks, Anton. I would say to anyone who's going through this journey, we live in a time where there's a lot of information out there. There are platforms like this that you can bring questions to get real life experienced responses that could help you to move your business and your ideas forward. I would suggest you take advantage of all of these things that are available to you now, that are for the most part free, and make the most of the information and the support that you get to help you to take your idea and make it ideally money making spinning machine for you. It's not easy doing your own thing, of course, and it can get lonely, overwhelming, etc. But if you have an idea that you really believe in, hang in there, keep selling it. Somebody's going to buy it, and you never know, you might become the next big thing. So hang in there.
Thank you very much, Rosie. Carl.
I just come back actually to something I think Rosie said at the beginning, which is the just importance, if you are taking on either employees or taking on contractors, of just being transparent and human with humans. As simple as that sounds, there's a dearth of that out there. And I think that, yeah, making your workplace human, looking after people, and keeping them so that they can run through walls for you, but also take care of themselves. I think this is a huge priority, and I know startup life is short, but it's not like that short. And the incremental effort to understand people, to make your place transparent, and to make it human are all eminently doable, and they are very high impact and high return factors that will increase your probability of success. So nice is not the point, as we say, right? It's ultimately a performance thing. So treat humans as humans.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much to all three of you. This is pure gold, and we've touched on some really important points when it comes to startup talent today. So I'm very thankful. I wish we would have had people here on Microsoft Teams instead to ask those questions directly and interactively. But nevertheless, it's good that we touched on these matters, I think. Just a few reminders before my parting words. Number one, we run 6 regular sessions. Mondays, as you can see today, it's talent. Tuesdays, product and tech. Wednesdays, growth. Thursdays, fundraising. Second Friday of the month, it's UK startup law. And third Friday of the month, it's UK Startup Finances. They're all from 12 to 1 p.m. UK time. And you may RSVP to any of them via our site, startup2scaleup.club. Second part is when you go to our site, actually, you may want to join our WhatsApp group and get alerts to all future conversations. There's a WhatsApp icon either at the top right or bottom of our website. Click on that and you'll get alerts. We have our competition for Startup of the Month. The entry deadline is done, and now from today at some point, hopefully, we will publish the 4 female founders that we are going to put forward, and the one that gets the most likes on our LinkedIn posts will be featured throughout all 19 Q&As that we have in March. So please feel free to check us out on that. And last but not least, just remember that none of this would be possible without people like Emily, Rosie, and Carl. So please feel free to follow them on LinkedIn and so on. And by the way, team, if you'd like to quickly copy and paste your LinkedIn URLs and put them in the chat here, because it will remain here, please feel free to do so. Now, as far as my parting words are concerned, just remember the startup journey can be quite challenging, but also quite fun. So try to enjoy it as much as you can and be kind to yourself and everyone else for that matter. Otherwise, hopefully, we'll see you tomorrow for Startup Product and Tech. We've got a brilliant team of panelists who will be taking questions and hopefully helping you build that early stage product or tech. Again, huge thanks to the panelists. Thank you to everyone else that joined. Great afternoon, and God bless you all. Bye-bye for now.
Take care.